So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to RAP Field Trips. My name is Krishna, and I'm here on behalf of RAP organizing this webinar. The RAP Field Trips webinar series bring together regulators and energy experts to share practical experiences from different jurisdictions. The idea is simple to learn from real world experiences, real world implementations, to exchange ideas and explore approaches that participants can adapt to their own regional contexts. And today's session, we are focusing on regulated distributed generation from policy to practice. And as distributed generation continues to grow, regulators are balancing a range of opportunities and challenges. And to throw more light on this, we have Bhoomika from GET.transform uh, here with us today. So I would like to extend our sincere thanks to Bhoomika and GET.transform for partnering with us today on today's session and helping bring together such a strong set of speakers and panelists. And with that in mind, with that said, I would like to hand over the floor to Bhoomika. Bhoomika, the floor is all yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Krishna. And good afternoon again to everybody who is joining from everywhere, it seems, basically. Big welcome. As Krishna already mentioned, my name is Bhoomika Tiwari. I am an advisor for regulation and market development at GET.transform. And GET.transform is basically a global technical assistance facility. And we are supporting a number of countries across Africa, Latin America, Central America, and the Caribbean with their energy sector transformations. We're working along 4 different work streams, everything from long-term energy planning, renewable energy grid integration, to on-grid and off-grid regulation and market development. And in terms of the topics that we are working on, we work on everything from mini grids to, let's say, utility scale, renewable energy, and then also, of course, distributed generation, which is the topic of our discussion here today. And just to not forget that we are also supported by a number of donor countries, including the European Union, Germany, Norway, Austria, Sweden, as well as the Netherlands. And I would now like to directly go into the presentation. So when I talk about, just to clarify, when we talk about distributed generation here today, we're not necessarily talking about off-grid distributed or decentralized systems, but really rather grid-connected rooftop solar sort of systems, which are usually also of small scale, maybe up to 1 megawatt or so, maybe or not with battery storage, right? And currently, what is happening in Africa is that there is a massive boom of solar. As you can see on your screen right now, there is a crazy growth and escalation in terms of solar PV imports into pretty much all the countries all across Africa. And we know from our work in the various countries where we have been interacting with various regulators, public utilities, and other public and private partners, that a massive amount of this capacity is going towards basically distributed generation or rooftop solar PV, and not as much towards, for instance, utility scale solar and so on. What does that mean then? However, what's also happening is that what you are seeing here is really aggregated numbers that we have from imports of solar from China for Africa. But at the country level, the visibility for this is lacking in, say, official tracking or official data, and also in energy sector expansion planning. That's more at the broader level, but what is also happening then? What does this mean really at the ground level? At the ground level, this kind of systems are basically supporting a number of different applications, be it commercial, business, industrial, or even residential units. I have here a few examples from countries where we have been working. So for instance, you can see in Madagascar, there is a company who did an application and was able to then, using the processes that were put into place, and then was able to install a small scale solar system to support their woodwork enterprise. Similarly, in Kenya, there is Cold Solutions, which is supporting cold storage for food and pharmaceuticals. And then in Eswatini, also systems that are powering commercial units and buildings, as you see. A lot of these types of, let's say, businesses or commercial units are turning towards solar also because it gives them an advantage in terms of price. It provides them with access to electricity and cuts down costs of, for instance, diesel. For instance, in Madagascar, as an example, if we talk about, say, a system that, or several systems that maybe add up to anywhere between 2 to 10 megawatt in power capacity, this could replace something like 1 million USD worth of diesel in a year. So the savings are massive, basically, just to give you a little bit of an example. In addition to the savings for the customers, there are several other opportunities presented by the inclusion of distributed generation in the sector, be it in terms of also leveraging additional private capital, as well as I mentioned already, energy access, and then additionally energy security. But also on the technical side of things, where we think of it from the perspective of the grid system, for instance, also a reduction in transmission and distribution losses. However, despite like all these amazing opportunities and benefits that do come with the distributed generation systems, there are a number of risks that we also see. For instance, I feel like someone has maybe their, if everybody can just mute themselves, thank you. We see a number of risks, for instance, with a number of, let's say, customers from the utility moving towards such systems. The demand on the utility side keeps going down, and then this affects negatively the financial security and revenue base of the utility. There are also instances where there can be issues of technical safety and power quality when if specific standards are not set into place, for example. The same with also network hosting capacities to ensure that there is safe integration of renewable energy into the main grid, so that it's not being overwhelmed, for instance. And then also, very importantly, what I also talked about at the very beginning, a lack of visibility. If we do not have data, and if we do not know what we need to manage, then this is going to affect the system operation, and you cannot manage what you do not see. And in the end, of course, there are only a limited set of capacities on the side of the public officials. So with all of this in mind, there is a great need to also ensure that all these risks are addressed through regulatory measures, through the correct tariff setting measures, and through technical standards. And this is sort of what we try to address in general through our program, of course, and also in partnership with all the stakeholders that we are working together with. But then also a few years ago, we launched an approach called the Policy Catalyst. And the Policy Catalyst is basically a tool via which we are bringing together a group of countries, and we do several rounds of cohorts under the Policy Catalyst. So for instance, in the first round, we would bring together a set of 5 countries who basically the key change makers within the correct agencies. So from the utilities, from the regulators, from the ministries, really the people who are actually working on these topics at legal, financial, technical levels. And all of them from various different countries come together, and we basically take them on a kind of learning journey using pre-prepared templates, modules, training material, covering all the regulatory and technical fundamentals that need to be put into place to ensure regulation and safe introduction of distributed generation or rooftop solar into our systems. And what this also provides an opportunity for different countries and cohorts to learn from each other and guide each other through their experiences. And then basically we're, as I mentioned, using pre-prepared templates, but the idea is to really use that as a base to really come to something that works for the country specifically and is something that the country actually needs. As you see here, and I mentioned the regulatory fundamentals, so we are working with several of these and basically targeting the regulatory and procedural aspect, the economic or tariff aspect, and then also the technical aspects. And we have several resource material, which you can also find at the link, which is on this slide, and it will be shared with you, so you would be able to access it quite easily. But we have basically training material and templates for various of these different topics. And what does that mean in practice? In practice, this means that we are working on things like net metering regulations, utility processes in terms of how to treat an application when it comes in for registering a system. What sort of technical specifications do these systems have to adhere to? What kind of tariffs, import-export tariffs would be set by the utility for sort of introducing or sending power back into the system or buying from the utility. So all of these questions are being discussed and answered, but also using the material that I just talked about. In the last 2 years, we have worked with 10 countries. And you can see here a map on the map, all the countries that we have been working with and all the progress that they have made. You see that they are all on the green side of things, and some started more in the red zone and some in the more yellow zone, and some were already quite advanced. But through our engagement with them and our work together, and also especially in partnership with Sustainable Energy Africa, who are a major part of the implementing team for this distributed generation policy catalyst window, and also together with AFUR and APWA, we have done quite a lot of work in basically setting up these foundational elements in all these countries. This means that we have by now almost over 10 sets of regulatory frameworks in place. We have capacitated over 350 officials in all these very many countries, and basically facilitating a pipeline of almost a gigawatt of distributed generation projects. And this includes processing of 67 actual real projects in a few of the countries already. We are also very happy that we have been able to, or actually Sustainable Energy Africa has been able to secure additional funding and onboarded very recently also 5 countries. This includes the Gambia, Ghana, Rwanda, Zambia, and South Africa. And with this, I would basically like to now open up for the panel discussion with a number of participants that we have here today, most of whom have either been part of this work and the distributed generation policy catalyst window from the regulator side of things, as well as from Sustainable Energy Africa, more from the implementing and facilitating side of things. We also were going to have someone from the utility in Kenya, but unfortunately there's been an emergency and Dalton would no longer be able to join us, but he did promise us that he may join as soon as possible. So hopefully still fingers crossed. But for now, I would like to welcome Monti Ntlopo from LEVA in Lesotho, the regulatory body. Also Ncamiso Nkambule from the regulatory authority in Eswatini, and then also Tanaka Shumba from Sustainable Energy Africa. I would maybe ask you all to please briefly introduce yourselves before we jump into the panel discussion. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good whatever time it is in your place or area. Like I've been introduced, I would prefer just to call me Monti because I know the second name is a challenge to most people. So I would be happy to be referred to as Monti. As indicated, I'm the manager responsible for technical regulation at the Lesotho Electricity and Water Authority. I think that suffices for now. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone, from the Kingdom of Eswatini. My name is Ncamiso Nkambule, and I work for the Eswatini Energy Regulatory Authority. I'm the project lead for the embedded generation or distributed generation project in Eswatini.
So, good afternoon or good day, colleagues. My name is Tanaka Shumba-Mukudu. I am a project manager at Sustainable Energy Africa. And as Bhoomika has mentioned, we are one of the implementing partners for the Policy Catalyst Distributed Generation window. And yeah, we've been working with about 14 partner countries over the last few years and looking forward to sharing some of the experience that we've gained with you today. Okay, thanks, Bhoomika.
Thank you so much, colleagues. And then I would just directly jump into my first question to you. And I have several of them. And I must say that a lot of the participants also had very many interesting queries. So I have tried to kind of collect them all together and bring a bit that represents everything that everybody was curious about. So at first, I mean, we just saw that there's been such a massive growth in rooftop solar across the African countries, including also yours. So maybe you can please share a little bit of what this looks like in your country specifically. And how are you, for instance, handling the permitting process in your countries, since you've been working on this now for a couple of years already? And it would be great if you could maybe talk about this from the perspective of the customer. So what does it look like for a customer wanting to install solar PV in, for instance, Lesotho and Eswatini for their commercial or residential unit? How would they go about it? What process would they follow?
I think maybe just to take it a little bit back in Eswatini, before we participated in the first cohort, there was really no direction, for lack of a better word. The industry was far ahead and there was absolutely no framework in place to assist and guide the industry and ensuring that we are catalyzing the industry towards renewable energy, but as well as protecting the technical side of things, which the grid would then experience. So after all the work that has been done, I think I'm happy to say that with the support that we've received from the program, we do have our embedded generation bylaws. I think they are at the final stages of gazetting, but we have started making them operational, which has assisted the industry in knowing in advance the technical requirements or the compliance requirements that needs to be adhered to before you even invest in solar, so that they can use that to evaluate whether it is worth investing in or not. And I think one of the most exciting things that have been brought about by the bylaws through the support once again is the net billing mechanism that it has since introduced. And I'm happy that the utility was launching the net billing today. From the 1st of next month, the net billing is going to be operationalized. And I think This has come about through basically the bylaws and the whole tariff determination methodology of the net billing mechanism was also through this support that we received from the program. So I think at the moment, because according to the legal framework, all plants that are below 100 kilowatts, that registration and permitting process has been delegated to the distribution companies. And then anything above 100 kilowatts, then the regulator has to step in. So I think now, because the bylaws are in place, there is that kind of structure that is being handled. An installer would have to go and apply for a permission to connect from the utility. Once approved, then they would have to do the installation if it's up below 100 kilowatts. But if it's above, then they have to apply for a license from the regulator. Once that is in place, they construct, and then they get a permission to generate, which would be the commissioning that is supervised by their relevant distribution company. But yeah, I think, sorry, as I said, it wasn't happening like that 3 years ago. You'd find that plants would be there and then all the documentation processes would follow, which was not ideal for our sector in Eswatini.
That's great. That's so great to know that the net billing was launched actually just today. So that's super great news. So congratulations first to you. And I know that the embedded generation regulations were up for gazetting, but this is amazing news. Thank you so much for sharing as well. And just also curious, Monti, how it looks for Lesotho. Is it similar? Are there some differences? How are you handling it over there?
Thank you, Bhoomika, for the opportunity to share what Lesotho is on. I deliberately let my colleague from the other kingdom, Mr. Nkambule, to go first, simply because they are way ahead of us in terms of implementation as far as DG is concerned. And I will always say it, I find it very ironic, and to some extent, it's a bit hating, because in 2016, when RERA hosted, he's a member of RERA, just like Lewa is, we thought we would be the lead in the region as far as DG was concerned, because it was then that we were developing our DG frameworks, not only DG, basically all encompassing renewable energy frameworks. And we were really excited to think that by the time these kind of meetings are held, Lewa would be leading, the experiences. But unfortunately, as things stand, when GET.transform, which we really thank once again for their general support, came on board, we had to say, yes, we had something that was drafted, but that was never put in place. So we are simply at the stage where now the application processes basically, which are governed by the very same DG rules that we are assisted by GET.transform, are yet to be implemented. So I cannot talk to any practical experiences as far as permitting is concerned, only to say the processes as outlined in the DG rules are more or less as my colleague from Eswatini presented. That is my submission for now, and I'm really sorry for that, because there isn't much on the ground that I can talk to. It's only the laws that we have that we expect to follow as implementation starts. Thank you for that, Bhoomika.
Okay, I mean, you're underselling yourself, I must say, Monti. You also do have the rules already up for parliamentary approval, yes? So that's definitely something that you can be proud about. But no worries, I'm sure you will have much more to share going forward. And just going back to you, Ncamiso, very quickly, maybe you can also briefly talk about the DG application platform that Eswatini is currently working on. And how this basically can support in a more transparent way for customers to register their systems, and how it will digitalize the entire process.
My apologies. My internet had a few issues. Can you please repeat a bit? I think we got cut. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. No, none at all. I just wanted to go back to you a little bit, since we were talking about the permitting processes, and I know that Eswatini is also working on an online portal for the registration process itself. I just wondered how this would then simplify the process itself and make it transparent and more digital. So how is that working out in Eswatini, please?
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. I think, as I had said before, the whole process was not structured, and that's why we had to start with the bylaws. But also, after the bylaws were in place, we discovered a gap in terms of now, especially for plants that are above 100 kilowatt, they would be expected, because everything is paper-based, they would be expected to submit the same set of information that they submit to the utility, to the regulator. And depending on who actions that application, they would then go with whatever approval that has been undertaken, which also is being taken without sight or without cognizant of what the other party, which would be either the utility or the regulator, has approved on their end. So I think this platform is going to be very useful for us, because it's going to streamline our processes, and it's making things easy also for the industry, because that have to travel long distances to come and apply and then come back again to apply to the regulator. And what we have actually noted is that what was now happening was that they would apply to who they fear the most. It would either be they apply to the regulator and stop just there and continue their projects, or apply to the utility and continue the project. And also you would find that also situations whereby now both entities make conflicting decisions. Say, for instance, the utility would approve an installation, but then when it comes to licensing, the regulator would say, this is not technically sound, it's not supposed to be allowed. So the streamlining is going to assist us in that regard. But also, lastly, after our own stakeholder consultations, we did discover that in terms of the timelines for both entities, there was no confidence from the industry that we are processing the applications within the correct timelines, not so as not to frustrate the industry. So with this platform and having it sit with the regulator, we're going to be monitoring, and we're also going to be monitored by the public as well, because these would have tracking references on when the application was submitted and when it was eventually approved. So that will also give the regulator that added oversight on how applications are being undertaken. Are they being approved within time? And also the decisions that are being made by the utilities, just to check if they are being taken in compliance with what the bylaws say. So the whole transparency, it's going to assist that. And also, I think just to add, because the platform now comes with a dashboard. Right now, it's quite difficult to say the total capacity of DG in Eswatini, because we have our own register as the regulator, and the utilities have their own. And most of the time, more often than not, there's always a huge disparity between these two data sets. So at least if we have one place where all the data is being kept and being publicly published to all stakeholders, it will show also the uptake of DG in Eswatini.
That sounds fantastic, I have to say, and we always want more credible data. So I really hope that the project takes off very soon. I know it's really in the final stages already, probably. So absolutely good luck on that, and really looking forward to see what comes out of it. So we talked a little bit about the procedural aspects and the regulatory aspects, and I think it would be also interesting for the audience to move towards a bit also the economic and technical parts of things. And this is also super important to have good economic and technical regulations. And maybe Tanaka, could you talk about some of the key elements of technical regulations and how you are implementing this in the various countries that you are working in?
Thanks, Bhoomika. So I think when it comes to distributed generation regulation, a lot of regulators that we've interacted with focus a lot on the economic side of things. So developing the tariff, are you net metering or are you net billing? But the technical side of things also is very important. So some of the interesting discussions that we've had with the utilities and the regulators include things like the system size. So when we are talking about a distributed generation system, how big is it in kilowatt hour terms? Like what capacity can it have? If it's too big, maybe larger than 5 megawatts, should be treated more as an independent power producer rather than an embedded generation type of system. Something else that we look at is how much of this distributed generation can actually be connected on different parts of your network. So within the regulations, you usually don't want to include too much technical detail, but the regulator definitely needs to stipulate how exactly the utility calculates this. How can they assess whether or not there's too much distributed generation on the system? So the regulator would outline that procedure. And obviously this would need to be in compliance with the various grid codes or your distribution code, of which in most countries that is something that is owned by the regulator. Another technical consideration is around the interface between your distributed generation system and the network, and the different specifications that you would need to have in place to ensure that when the system decides to feed back excess electricity onto the grid, it's not going to negatively impact how your network has already been operating. So that's also another technical consideration. We also include things like metering. So the types of meter that you can have, we definitely recommend that you don't use a conventional spinning disc meter. I think the best practice is to have a bidirectional meter, so you're able to read electricity flows in both directions. The regulations also really need to be quite clear about the processes that the utility needs to follow. I think the most difficult thing is when in an industry there's a lot of ambiguity, where people are not certain what the role of the utility is or how long they can expect to get a response for. So the regulator really needs to outline that so that it's very clear, and the level and the playing field is quite leveled. And then the last important thing to include within the technical aspects is the responsibility of the prosumers. So it's not just about what the utility is doing, but you as an embedded generation or distributed generation customer, what responsibility do you have towards this particular a system that you've decided to connect onto the grid? And if there are any fees that need to be paid, then the regulator also needs to be very clear about these aspects as well. Thanks, Bhoomika. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry, Bhoomika.
Yes, thank you. No, I was just saying thanks for being so thorough. I think that's very insightful in terms of also really needing to focus on the technical aspects just as much as the other ones. But I have to say, you also walked into my next question, which is on tariffs now. So if it's good for you, then maybe just feel free to answer, Tanaka, but also I would like to welcome Monti and Ncamiso to weigh in on this. Like how do you set appropriate levels of tariffs for consumers or basically prosumers, because we're thinking about a shift here, right, to also self-generators who are sending power back into the system.
I can start, and then my colleagues can also then jump in.
Sure.
So I think when it comes to tariffs, the most important thing, or the first step, is to understand the type of compensation methodology that you're going to be implemented within your country. So we often speak of net metering or net billing. When we're speaking about net metering, we're talking about compensating on a one-to-one basis. So if you decide to buy electricity from the utility, perhaps we charge you 100 cents per kilowatt hour. If you decide to feed back that electricity onto the grid, they'll also give you 100 cents per kilowatt hour for that same electricity. I think that has been used across the world, and people have found that net metering is really not advised for a lot of reasons. But the biggest one is that it leaves your utility quite vulnerable to revenue loss because of the volumetric aspect of it. So once you're certain that net metering is not going to work, the next best thing would be using net billing. And when you have net billing, you have a tariff that is broken down into different components. So you have a fixed component that helps you to recover all your network costs. You have a variable component, which you utilize for purchasing any electricity from the grid. And then you would have an export credit, which allows you to feed back any excess, which allows you to be compensated for any excess electricity that you feed back onto the grid. So those will be the three main components that you would have when you do net billing. Best practice, what is recommended is that whenever you set any of these tariffs, they need to be backed up by a cost of supply study. So you can't just develop a tariff from nowhere. There needs to be some data that backs up this particular tariff that you would have in place. And then I think the biggest risk that we have found from the utilities that we've been working with is that a lot of our utilities still have a bundled tariff where we have one single volumetric charge that we are then utilizing to recover both your fixed costs along with your energy costs. So through the program, what we definitely recommend is that as a first step, utilities do look towards unbundling these different costs. Yeah, I will hand over to the honorable regulators to perhaps add to that.
Maybe I can just direct the attention a little bit on that when you jump in, either Monti or Ncamiso. So thanks, Tanaka, by the way, for also clarifying the difference between net metering and net billing and how that comes out in the tariff structuring. For instance, that's actually one of the questions also in the group chat. So I hope that answers the question as well. But maybe Monti and Ncamiso, you could also talk about what kind of system you are following for your countries. Is it net metering? Is it net billing? Well, actually, you did say net billing for Eswatini, but also what guided this decision, for instance. Yeah, maybe you could talk a little bit more towards that.
Okay, thanks, Bhoomika. Maybe I will start. I think just to add before I come to your last question, just to add from what Tanaka has just shared. I think one of the biggest challenges that we found in Eswatini was that the actual, even in terms of the overall cost of supply, just take DG aside, the truth of the matter is that especially domestic customers, they are definitely not paying what they are supposed to be paying. And I think the biggest problem in our landscape, I'm not sure if it's an African problem or what, but also the price of electricity has been infiltrated by politics, which makes it difficult for us regulators to set the true cost of electricity. And now when you come with a DG tariff, it makes the problem worse, because now you find that the non-DG customers are now subsidizing the actual cost for the DG customers, and more often than not, DG muscle than the non-DG customers, so that find themselves being subsidized by really the poor customers. And that's one thing that had to be taken into consideration when we were doing our cost of supply. So even though it was not a full cost of supply, but we undertook a simplified cost of supply, which then suggested that there should be a consideration to introduce fixed charges, which in a fair manner should have been introduced for all customers, but just to try and minimize the impact that DG customers would have on non-DG customers, probably the easiest way would actually mean having that fixed charge for starters on DG customers only. Also, there's issues around capacity that the utility always has to provide for the capacity, always has to be available when DG is not there. And how does the utility recover that? That has to be taken into consideration. So it was one of the reasons why we opted for net billing, and over above the net billing, we used the avoided cost methodology. In our calculations, we calculated the amount of money that the utility is avoiding by procuring from DG customers or vis-a-vis what they would pay if they were importing the power or paying generators. And at the moment, because we wanted to start on a conservative approach, because most of these are assumptions and we don't know the real impact that this would have on the utility. We started on 50% of the avoided cost. I know it's very conservative, but for starters, we wanted to start on a conservative approach so that in the next tariff determination process, then the utility using actual data would then have to apply for a much better and much more favorable tariff to the consumers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that input. I think that kind of really demonstrates as a real world example what Tanaka was, talking about. Monti, is there something also from your side to share on this topic? I think this is something that really is a burning concern for everybody too.
Thank you, Bhoomika, for the opportunity once again. And I will want to say again, when you talk from the point of theory and concepts, you'll never speak like somebody who talks from the point of practice and experience. And Tanaka has already highlighted the key differences between net metering and net billing, and the rationale for opting for the latter, that is net billing. And on that advice, since like I'm saying, we have not come to the ground and implement things, we are basically being guided by those we have experience. We opted for net billing on those very grounds that because of the one-to-one compensation in net metering, that may have adverse effects on the utility, which is one of the key risks that we want to avoid. So in the interest of not repeating what she said, and in the interest of time once again, I would stop here and would be happy to say more in the next question that is specifically directed to me as a Lesotho in the next round when I'm given the opportunity.
Then maybe let me directly give you the opportunity. And in terms of just asking, what in your experience are some of the key capacity gaps that are also holding back the regulators and maybe also the utilities in terms of speeding up processes? I know you also talked about how Lesotho was one of the first countries in the region to really start talking about this subject, but then now you feel that you are actually not as ahead in the race as some of the others in the region. So what are then the capacity gaps that are keeping you from speeding up some of these processes in terms of the licensing regulatory aspects or net billing aspects or interagency approvals, and how do training initiatives help or bridge this gap?
Thank you very much, Bhoomika, for that. I always say when I start to answer these kind of questions, say all instruments or tools that govern the regulatory processes, much as at the end of the day they are approved by the regulator, and the regulator is the one that is expected to enforce them. Those are not the regulator's documents. They are basically industry documents. And what that says is all the key stakeholders in the industry, starting from the policymaker down to the regulator, the utility, and other players, they have to first and foremost have a common understanding, like the case in hand now, the DG. I have realized from the experiences during the interactions with the stakeholders, most of our stakeholders perceive DG in the context that it is defined as something that they were not looking for. They actually want to compare it to an IPP where they are expected to make more money, whereas the major objective of this DG and the DG rules hence are aligned to that is to make sure that people self-supply, but the excess that comes back to the grid then has a framework that governs it. But that's not the way most of the stakeholders, including the government, I must point out, because I had a meeting a few weeks ago with the officials from the Ministry of Energy in the department specifically. So they still had that misalignment with us as the regulator, despite the fact that when the journey started, we were all together under Tanaka's tutelage, but things as they stand. So I'm simply saying, for us as Lesotho, we need to align our understanding of these key concepts and then align and also harmonize our understanding of the objectives of the frameworks. Once that gets sorted out, then implementation will roll out. But the single most key constraint as far as capacity is concerned for Lesotho is that, especially talking to DJ, we don't have certified installers for these particular systems. So without that, I do not see how we can effectively and efficiently go about implementing DG. So we would really seek further support from our generous partner being GET.transform to carry us along that journey. And I guess once we go past that stage, then things will start happening in Lesotho. That's the contribution I want to make, Bhoomika. If there is something that is not very clear, I'm ready to be guided further.
No, very clear. And I have to also say that anyone and everyone can basically do with a refresher on the fundamentals and the concepts. So it's useful for everyone, regardless of which, progression level they are at. And thank you for your input, Monty, very much. Just I see here that maybe Dalton has joined, has been able to join us from KPLC in Kenya, and it would be really nice to also have a little bit of utility perspective. Dalton, are you okay? Perhaps joining, just jumping in a little bit.
Yes.
Okay, hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you, and very nice to see you. I just wanted to ask you a quick question, but perhaps you also want to give a quick introduction of yourself.
Oh, yes. Thank you. And apologies for joining late. My name is Dalton Lagat from Kenya. I work for a utility called Kenya Power and Lighting Company. We are the only utility working throughout the Republic of Kenya.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Dalton. And we're still glad that you are able to join and weigh in a little bit. So we've just been talking a lot about, the regulatory processes and also the need for having really good technical regulation in place. We've also been talking about the various kind of options available in terms of how we should set revenues or deal with tariffs, for instance. Sorry, not revenues, but how to deal with tariffs. I just want to maybe ask you a little bit on a more general level then, from your experience also, because Kenya is also quite advanced and there's a lot of rooftop solar growth and pressure building up. What do you see also as the most impactful regulations that should be in place for mobilizing also private investment in rooftop solar?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. For Kenya, so far we are moving very well in terms of implementing the net metering, especially after the trainings that we had with the utility and the regulator together. Currently, we are almost achieving that. There's some few areas which we are still working on to be able to start doing the net metering. So first of all, our regulations provides that we do the net metering at a tariff of 50%, meaning that for every one export, every one unit, we give you 50% incentive on that. Of course, it was backed by the a study which was done by the regulator by factoring in the issue of the revenue requirements of the utility, factoring in also the issue of the avoided costs because we are getting this energy at the distribution level, factoring in also the fixed costs which we are already charging in our tariff, lumped up together on the energy costs. So that's how our tariff was derived at. And of course, as a utility, we requested the study and they were able to share with us. And this is going to be a very good starting point for us. Of course, there are other issues which we had also inquired from the regulator, especially the demand charge, being able to avail that capacity when the customer is on the DG, and then later on when they come back, how do we handle that, maintenance cost and all that? But for a starting point, I think 50% is not bad. As we net meter and get the metrics and data, then of course we'll be able to do more study and validate what the regulator was able to do. Yeah, so that's the situation in for our country right now. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think we have like a good perspective from all three countries on how they are handling this topic also. I'm seeing that we are a little bit behind on time in terms of Q&A. So I want to hold on to some of the questions, like the last question that I had, and maybe already open up the floor to the participants with respect to reforms, for instance, tax related, and what can enable acceleration of DRE and net metering in African countries. So a bit broadly in terms of reforms and incentives for enabling net metering in African countries.
Maybe if I may, Bhoomika, on that one.
Yes, please.
I think from a regulatory perspective, the first point of contact should be having the framework in place, have it gazetted and have it operational, because that's one thing that may delay the industry, where the stakeholders don't know the limits or the expectations that they have. I think that should be the first, because also when you talk of taxes, you find that the approval of such incentives, in as much as they are good, but it would take a lot of time for governments to agree to some form of tax incentives. So I think the best way is have your regulatory framework in place, have your technical requirements in place, have your net billing rules or net metering rules in place, and then the industry is going to, because also in what we saw in Eswatini, the absence of the framework did not stop the industry from growing. It's just that it was growing in a direction that we were not comfortable as the regulator, and also that the utility was not comfortable at as well. So it was important that we speed up the process and make sure that the sector is properly guided in terms of the uptake of DG.
Yeah, very true. And just as okay, this is actually, thank you, Ncamiso, for stepping in on that one, and totally in agreement. It's something that's happening anyway. It's more about guiding how it happens, and it's important to put then frameworks in place to do exactly that. Then from Musa, we have a question on what is the impact of distributed generation on the utility in terms of financial and technical challenges. So, I mean, we already have been talking about this a little bit, and maybe Dalton, since you are also working with the utility, this is perhaps something you may want to address, the impact on the utility in terms of financial technical challenges.
Thank you for the question. I think for the issue of the impact, it's very, very important if it's backed up by a study, which is done jointly between the utility and the regulator. so that they can be able to come up with a very good tariff, which does not either favor the DG customer or has a negative impact on the utility. So for the impact, once you are able to do the studies, look at all the parameters, the cost of operations, the cost of the energy purchase, so on and so forth, then you can be able to see the impact that will have on the revenues, and therefore be able to come up with a favorable tariff for the DG customers. I think that is always the best approach to be able to look at the impact in terms of the utility, especially when you're determining the issue of the tariff. Of course, the technical challenges will be taken care of when you have the things like interconnection requirements properly set. Then you'll be able to take care of the issue of the technical challenges. The issues of the fixed cost also in the tariff, maybe be able to support that, so that you're able to have some revenue to take care of the issue of the O&M operations and the maintenance. Thank you.
Okay, Tanaka, would it be okay for you to just very briefly talk about some of the commonalities or some of the trends that you have now seen emerging in all the now that you're working in 15 countries, like what's happening basically, what common issues might there be, and how do we basically move towards real implementation after having established all the key foundational frameworks?
Thanks, Bhoomika. So I think you rightly say the challenges that are faced in many of the African countries are quite similar, and I think it's what we have seen, what we've highlighted within this 1 hour period. What has been quite interesting for us is that I think when we started the program, a lot of the utilities that we spoke to had quite a bit of resistance when it came to distributed generation. They didn't want to hear about it. They were very worried about their revenues and the impact on their grid. But what is now emerging over time is that the attitude towards distributed generation really has changed. So utilities are now thinking about how can they actually leverage off this private investment and use that for their particular gains, whether it's increasing the amount of kilowatt hours on the grid, or being able to provide areas that they haven't been able to provide electricity to. Utilities are now thinking about things like virtual power plants. They're thinking about using these systems for demand load management. They're talking about digitization. So it's quite a shift, and I think it really has been refreshing to see that utilities aren't as scared as they were before, but are understanding that we are in this new wave. And as we've rightly said, distributed generation is not controlled by the regulator or the utility. It's something that comes from private sector, and rather than being afraid of it, it's fantastic to be able to work on it. So I think it's really been fantastic to see the progress that's been made on the continent.
Thank you so much, Tanaka, for also that overview, and I think that's like a nice wrap up as well to the discussion here today. I thank you very much also, of course, all the other panelists like Tanaka, Ncamiso, Monti, Dalton. We really appreciate your time, and it's really nice that you could share also some of your experiences here today. Would also be great to have more time, but that's not what we have. So we have to be satisfied with this today. And thank you, of course, all the participants, and also to Krishna for all the support behind all of this. So just handing it back to Krishna for the wrap. Yeah.
Thanks, Bhoomika. And thank you everyone for attending. Before we jump out of this call, I'd just like to remind everyone this is the third episode in the RAP Field Trip series. In the first episode, we covered about interregional planning and learning across borders. We spoke about how energy regulators plan infrastructure and markets that extend beyond their jurisdictions. In the second episode, we covered regulating under uncertainty. In that session, we discovered how regulators can take more risk-aware approach to decision making. And in today's episode, we learned about how to enable rapid growth in these systems while maintaining a safe, reliable, and financially sustainable electricity system. So we will soon be back with another new topic and another new episode. Meanwhile, if you would like to check the recordings from the previous webinars, you can check out the link in the chat here. And I will also be sharing a feedback form link with you where you can suggest what new topics that you would like to hear from what regulators and what topics you want to hear, and we'll try our best to get them on this panel, on this series. Thank you, Bhoomika. Thank you, all the speakers, and thank you, all the attendees. I hope you had some valuable takeaways. And a big thanks to GET.transform and the speakers for sharing their work and enlightening us with the knowledge. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please feel free to send us or Bhoomika an email with your questions. We'll address them and continue the conversation there. And we hope to see you in the next episode. Have a nice day, and thank you all for joining.